Korea Overlander. My name is Ben. So glad to have you here. Before we deep dive into this particular video, just a couple of shout outs. First of all, don't forget the Korea Overlander merch that we now have available. Check out this beauty shirt. Woo! Check out the link in the description below. Bonfire.com/store/Korea Overlander. 100% of the proceeds from the shirts, coffee mugs, echo bags, and crew necks all go to a local charity here in Korea called Child Fund. Check them out down in the description below as well. Number 2, don't forget to hit somewhere where you see the Instagram icon. Pause the video, take out your camera, click on that, and it will take you right to my Instagram channel. It will also give you a link to the YouTube channel here. If you have not subscribed, please do so. Help us out, please. Okay, so this is the 4th video that I've made of this series. I just cannot seem to get it right. I've either had a mechanical issue where I'm getting static on the sound, or it just doesn't, the information doesn't quite come up right. And I realized that all the other videos I was trying to do too much at the same time. So I'm going to break this down into a little mini series that deals with how to go about buying a 4x4 or some type of overland or camping vehicle here in Korea. So, 5 parts. I've got them literally written down in my book so that I remember what they are and can focus a little bit more for you, okay? Now, this list is by no means exhaustive. I'm sure there are many things that you think are important for an overland 4x4 vehicle. If I've missed something, put it down below. I'd love to kind of know what you think about all of this. One caveat I will mention. I am not a mechanic. I am not a mechanic, okay? I've dabbled, and that's about it. So this is research coming off of very reputable sites that allow people like me who are more enthusiasts at this point, maybe such as yourself, but it does give us a framework and a guideline as to what we should be looking for. And that's today what I want to provide you. Condense all of the research that I've done into a 20-minute video to help you sort it out. Okay, so here we go. Number 1. The first thing that you should be looking for is, or thinking about, is to determine, do you want an all-wheel drive or do you want a 4x4? Now, in my opinion, I think a 4x4 is probably going to be a better experience. I'll explain why in a second. But let me tell you about each of these things, okay? So that you understand what they are. An all-wheel drive allows the engine to send power equally to all 4 tires at the same time. Okay? Very simple. That's not hard, right? Very simple. Most of the all-wheel drives will have a center differential, and power will go equally to the front tires and the rear tires, and that will provide very good traction control. It's kind of an all-weather sort of vehicle, so if you've got dry conditions, snowy conditions, wet conditions, icy conditions, light off-road conditions, then something like that will probably be okay. All right. A good example of this type of vehicle is the Subaru Legacy. No, not the Legacy, sorry. The Subaru Outback would be a good example of something like that. They've done a lot of iterations over the years to really develop a very high quality all-wheel drive system. At least that's what the reviewers are telling me. And so that might be one area to consider, you know. Okay, so that's the all-wheel drive side. Now, what about the 4-wheel drive side? What about the 4x4 side? Well, this is a more complicated system. but it's complicated for a reason. So I'm going to try to explain this in the easiest way possible if by any chance you don't understand what this is. Okay, so I got my notebook right here, okay? So what this does, what this system does, is it takes the torque, which is the way that the tires move at low speed, distributes that power to the front and the rear axle. All right, when it distributes the power to those tires. Okay, so the tires on the front, there's the axle, and the power is coming up here. The power is also going back to the rear axle with the tires, okay? It's sending the torque 50% to the front and 50% to the back, okay? That's the first part. Seems simple enough, right? Seems almost like an all-wheel drive, right? Kind of, but not quite. Because when you are in 4x4 mode, whether a 4x4 high or low gear, you can't go on the regular road. Those particular transmission gears are designed only for being off-road. When you are out of the high or low, then you're in essentially an all-wheel drive mode, or perhaps a rear wheel mode only, and you can drive around willy-nilly on the pavement in the city without a problem. Okay? Now, there's one other aspect to the four-wheel drive, and that is, as we just talked about, it splits the power from the front and the rear. However, it does not take into account the power from one side to the other. It only splits the power this way. Okay, so this is the front and this is the back. It does not separate the power from the left to the right side of the vehicle. That's where we have something called the differential locking systems, or you could say for short the diff locks or the lockers. Those terms are used kind of interchangeably. They all describe the same thing. And what these lockers do essentially is allow when you have a rear diff or a front diff or both, that is another layer of traction control that allows one wheel to stop moving, and that power, let's say this one here has stopped, let's say this one here is not touching the ground, so it would be doing this, right? The locker freezes that tire because there's no traction underneath, and this power goes to this wheel, which does have traction on the ground. So now this wheel has 50%. All of the power along that axle is sent to this tire. That allows the car to move out of a ditch, a hole, etc. Okay? I hope that wasn't too complicated, but that is essentially what a 4x4 does with diff lockers or lockers. Now, you can have some cars that only have a center diff. You can have some that have a center rear diff. And you can have vehicles that have center, rear, and front diff. Okay, so a Discovery 4, for example, the one I was looking at, or those sorts of cars, all of them will come with center. Some of them will come with rear. You have to check to see whether that's the case, and there's certain ways of doing that. I'm not going to get into that right now. Or an example would be a Jeep Rubicon, a Wrangler Rubicon, which actually has factory installed front lockers as well. Okay, so depending on what your off-road needs are, there are cars to match what you could actually want or use regularly. All right, so all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive. If you're not quite sure what I mean, there's different websites to check out. One of them is that I really like is called Engineering Explained. I'll leave a link down in the description below to that video that really goes into the nitty-gritty a lot more for you. Okay? Now, my number 2 thing that you should be looking for when buying a 4x4 vehicle: the size of the vehicle. How many doors does it have? Is it a 2-door? Is it a 4-door? And is it a 4-door with a hatch, or with a, you know, with a back door that opens up? All right, that would be classified, I guess, as a 5-door. Why is this important? Well, because it depends on 2 things. Again, it depends on your family and the type of gear you have. If you are a solo runner, a 2-door Jeep Rubicon or a Sahara might do just fine for you. You don't need a lot of space. It's just you. And you have enough space in that to pack your stuff up and boom, you're off for the weekend. However, if you have a family and a dog, or just a family, then you might want to consider something larger. A Jeep Sahara or a Jeep Rubicon 4-door will give you a lot more room. Plus, it has a nice back end space, a nice boot area to put your gear in. Okay, so again, that's something else you want to consider. I think for the reason I was actually looking at a Discovery 4, because I did feel that I did need more room. Even though I have 4 people, I wanted to have a ride that was more comfortable and it had more space so we weren't squished in together. The pictures of me in a boat with 4 people with all of my camping gear was atrocious, and I hated that. And it was like, I wish I had a better car. But again, those are things that are personal, and I will leave you to decide that for yourself. The third thing that I think, in my opinion, is something you should be considering when purchasing an off-road / overlanding / camping vehicle is the rooftop weight. Now, I didn't think this was really much of a big deal until I started running down the rabbit hole and realized it kind of is. So I'm glad that I put this on the list. All manufacturers will have a maximum weight that you can put on your rooftop with a factory installed roofing system. Anywhere between 50 to 100 kilograms, depending on the make and model of the car. You're going to want to check that out for yourself. For the Land Rover Discovery with a roof rack from Land Rover, it's about 75 kilograms or about 150 pounds. Now, it also depends on whether or not you decide to go with a non-factory related sort of rooftop system. Now, for an example, I have picked Rhino rack on 2 different vehicles to show you that there are in fact different numbers that you need to pay attention to. So let's look at the Jeep Rubicon. All right, I didn't pick any particular year, just generally speaking. The Rhino rack has a static weight of 800 kilograms. Okay, I'm going to explain that in a second. And has a dynamic weight of, not kilograms, pounds, 800 pounds, so about 400 kilograms. And a dynamic weight with this particular Rhino rack with 264 pounds or approximately 132 kilograms, give or take. But the rooftop factory weight is 70 kilograms on a Jeep Rubicon. Now, what is that whole thing, dynamic and static? Okay, well, the dynamic weight means how much weight the rooftop can take when you are moving. All right, so when you've got your rooftop tent on, let's say, you want to be under that that dynamic weight, or else you may in fact have some problems. The static weight, however, is how much weight the vehicle can take when it's sitting and stationary and not moving. Okay, so if you have, let's say your rooftop tent on your JK Rubicon is 150 pounds. Well, you're still 100 pounds under the dynamic weight. You're not going to have a problem. But also, when you're sitting, your car is stopped and you're camping and you folded out your rooftop tent, for example, you've got the rooftop tent unfolded, 150 pounds, 160 pounds, and then you've got, let's say, 3 bodies and a dog in the tent, and now that weight goes up to, let's say, add another 300 pounds on top of that for all the bodies in there. Now you're up to 450 pounds. You're still under the static weight of the rooftop load, so you're not going to have any problems. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure that you understand those weights. All right, so that's on one. That's the Rubicon. Because I was looking at the LR4, I wanted to give you those numbers as well, and this was, again, with a Rhino rack. This was a Pioneer Tradie with without the backbone. It has 360 kilograms, 360 pounds of dynamic weight. 360 pounds of static weight, which is movement weight, right? Plus it has 793 pounds of static weight. Okay, so you can see that those numbers are kind of similar, but not exactly. So again, you want to be able to check out that weight for each of the vehicles. All right, understand? Hope so. Number 4, tires and brakes. Tires in particular, I think, is one thing that a lot of people don't pay attention to. And I'm not talking about 4x4 community, because they sure do. But generally speaking, I don't think tires is something that people really consider. And it's your first safety contact from your vehicle to the road, and it's important to keep this in mind. Now, when you go and check out a used vehicle, check the tire depth, because it may be okay, but you might realize that in about 6 months, you're going to have to change those tires. Therefore, you need to factor in those costs kind of in the initial purchase, okay? If they're bare, you better get them fixed. Or you can negotiate the price down to include the cost of the tires that you want, okay? So if it's going to cost you $1,000 to buy a set of tires, have them knock $1,000 off the price because you're having to put that yourself. Okay, so that's something you can maybe negotiate. It's potential. The other thing, brakes. Not all brake systems are created equal, and not all factory installed brake systems are best for your vehicle. You want to check out the forums and YouTube videos on the types of factory installed braking systems on your car and whether you feel that those are safe enough for fast stopping or slowing the vehicle down. Okay? The one nice thing about the Discovery 4 that was upgraded was the braking system. The LR3, the earlier edition, 2004 to 2009, was those brake pads were actually smaller, and so the brake pads and calipers were also smaller, and you needed to leave a lot more space between you and something in front of you for emergency stopping, because let's face it, LRs are pretty hefty vehicles. They're 2.5 tons. Yeah, they're that big. So you want to be able to understand that sort of thing. The other thing you want to consider, or the other thing that Land Rover did was in the LR4, they increased the wheel size and they increased the pad size brakes and calipers also increase, so you've got a lot more space, a lot more grabbing space for those pads and calipers to grab onto when you need to brake. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well. The other thing that you might want to consider is whether or not you want to actually air down your system. That's something I'm not going to talk about right now, but there's some tires are better for that than others. Some wheels are better for that than others. So keep that in mind. If you don't know what air down is, I'm going to leave a link in the description below just to at least provide you a point of reference for that information. I don't want to talk about that right now. Okay. The fifth and final thing that you should be looking at when you are looking to purchase a vehicle for overlanding: ride height and body protection. These are like a 5A, 5B, because I think they kind of fit together in some way, shape, or form. Ride height, ground clearance is another way of putting this. Ground clearance is, if this is where your tire is sitting and this is the ground, how many centimeters or how many inches do you have until the lowest spot in the undercarriage of your vehicle? Okay? Not the side of your vehicle. You have to look under to see at what point is the lowest point. All right? What is the lowest point of the vehicle? Usually that's the transmission housing, but not always. Okay? So let's say you have a ride height or ground clearance of 11 inches, about 23 centimeters. Okay? It's not bad. All right? Now, that's going to change depending on whether you can elevate your vehicle or whether you did. It also depends on the tires that you have. So pay attention to the factory sort of settings that you have for that. Every vehicle is going to be different. Some vehicles, like the Rubicon, for example, you can go in and take out the shock system and put in a different system. Let's say it goes from 2 inches, you want to go 3.5, that's fine. Or you want to put a 35-inch tire on, that's fine. All of that is going to change the dynamic of how much space you have underneath. The LR4 has a shock system that inflates, so you can press a button inside the car and it's going to go up or down depending on what you need. Okay, so that's, again, something else for you to keep in mind there. The reason why it's better to have more space than less is because when you go over bumps and rocks, you're trying to minimize the amount of damage that could occur underneath if you hit something. And that's where body protection or skid plates, especially underneath, can be extremely valuable. If you are doing anything, having that underbody protection, those important pieces that you have, your transmission, your gearbox, your oil pan, those sorts of things you want to keep, your gas tank, you want to keep protected. Okay, so does the vehicle come with some basic or rudimentary undergirding? If not, you might want to consider having some installed. Yes, it's going to add a little bit of weight to you, but to your vehicle, but at the same time, it's also going to provide you with a little bit of sense of security should that be the case. All right, so I'm at 25 minutes. That's it, all right? Those are my top 5 things that you should potentially be looking for in a vehicle if you're gonna go off-road. I hope this helps. I hope it helps, I really do. We are going to get into another video at some future, future week from now or 2 weeks from now. that does deal a little bit more with individual vehicles and what you should be looking for when you are looking for X particular vehicle, whether it be a Jeep or a Land Rover or a VW Touareg, that sort of thing, right? So there's different things that you should be looking for, and I'll be going through that with you as well. Besides, then we can get some vehicles on the channel, which is great. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks very much. Don't forget, hit the sub button. Check out the merch store. This stuff is so comfortable. I love it. And the Instagram channel, instagram.com/Korea Overlander. Don't forget to check that out as well. Thank you very much. I'm so glad you were here. And remember, live life well. Peace, everybody. We'll catch you next time.